So I decided to start this Riftbound guide mini-series, and when you want to practice and improve at something, the best place to start are the basics. So that's why I decided to go over on how you should take into account the turn order and battlefield of choice when side decking between games, and then how to build side decks in any meta. So firstly, how should the turn order affect your side decking and how to plan for it? It is important to plan out your side decking, units and cards, depending on if you're going to be going first or second. And what I mean by this is that if you, for example, won your game 1 and you know you're most likely be going second in your game 2, side deck accordingly. Because we all know the first player in Riftbound gets 2 runes and the second player obviously gets 3 runes in their turn 1. So sometimes in Yi or Darius, you could swap in an extra 3-drop or just swap out a 2-drop in general when you're going second. Because, for example, if you have 7 2-drops and 6 3-drops in your deck, having 3 runes at the start of your game then widens the possibility of your turn 1 plays from 7 cards in your deck to 13 cards in your deck. And then you don't need as many 2-drops in your deck anymore, and you can swap out your 2-drops to, match up specific counters or really anything that you think is gonna be more important in that game. And then vice versa, when you have 2 runes at the start, you need to prioritize 2-drops more and maybe swap in that 7th 2-drop from your side deck when you know you're gonna be going first. This might seem insignificant at first, but then when we add the battlefields and their effects on top of that, it's gonna enhance the importance of the turn 1 related side decking. So then how should the battlefields affect your side decking choices? Let's take 3 good examples of how important the side decking around battlefields actually is. Firstly, a very basic example, Arena's Greatest. Arena's Greatest is just a simple +1 point to each player at the start of the game, and usually aggressive deck lists want to run this battlefield. You usually also pick this battlefield when you know you're going first, and with how accelerated the Arena's Greatest game is gonna be, it is even more important that you have that turn 1 play. So now we have to take into account, we have 2 runes, we have the accelerating battlefield, and when the turn 1 play is even more important than before, we have to make sure that we have at least 7 2-drops in that case, because missing the turn 1 might be the biggest difference between winning or losing that game. Then of course, with the Arena's Greatest, you would also swap in something more aggressive like a Vayne, or swap out a Grand Stratagem or a Time Warp or anything late game that could be too slow. You most likely are not gonna need Grand Stratagem or Time Warp in the Arena's Greatest game because the game is gonna end so much sooner that those bigger game-ending cards are most likely gonna be too slow, and they're most likely also gonna break your hand. So the second example is for control decks like Aurora with the battlefield Obelisk of Power that gives +1 rune at the start of the game to each player. Now let's say it's game 2, you're going to be going second, and with the +1 rune from the battlefield, you will end up having 4 runes total in your first turn. So now I would want to add a third Catalyst of Eons for a game like this, because now I can just play Catalyst turn 1 if I find it, getting 2 runes from the Catalyst and 2 runes next turn, and getting 2 runes from the Catalyst if you get it turn 1, and then 2 runes at the start of your next turn would put you at 8 runes on turn 2. And in general, you could have a game plan with the Obelisk of Power where you just side deck greedier. You take away those early game cards, you play with the thought in mind that you are most likely gonna have at least 7 runes on your turn 2. So you can just play bigger cards, play more for the end game, and this way these niche little tricks and tactics according to the battlefield, according to your turn 1, how many runes you will have on your turn 1, they kind of add up. You could have 1 or 2 cards in your side deck for when you know you're going first or second, then 1 or 2 cards for your side deck for a certain battlefield, and just for, certain combos on going first in Arena's Greatest or going second in Obelisk of Power, etc, etc. And then example 3 is Zaun Warrens. When I play Zaun Warrens, I like to side deck in a lot of spells because, for example, in Darius, spells are cheap. They're usually 2 cost, and the normal problem with Darius is that you can't run too many spells because it's an aggro deck, and spells can break your early games pretty hard. If you draw too many spells, you don't have enough units, and suddenly you can't really play anything. But Zaun Warrens gets rid of that problem. If you have a spell-heavy hand, just conquering Zaun Warrens once can just unbrick your hand instantly, because Zaun Warrens can just unbrick your hand by discarding cards you don't need. So Zaun Warrens allows me to go way greedier on the spells and seals. And on the flip side, if your hand is empty with the Zaun Warrens, you draw a card for free. Zaun Warrens says discard one, then it says draw one. It doesn't say discard one to draw one. So if your hand is empty, you draw one for free. And this way, if I side decked in a lot of cheap spells, cheap units, seals, etc., I could also be looking to vomit out my hand as early as possible to then start kind of drawing 2 cards per turn whenever I conquer the Zaun Warrens, because I emptied my hand and suddenly the Zaun Warrens is just a free +1 draw for me. And this strategy has actually worked a lot of times with the Zaun Warrens, and I have noticed that swapping out 2 to 3 cards that work well with your battlefield and your game plan with that battlefield and with the effect of that battlefield actually has a significant difference, especially in certain matchups. With Arena's Greatest into Aurora, you have at least 2 Vanes with Arena's Greatest, maybe you have 2 Dariuses, you just end the game fast and make sure that you have the turn 1 play, and if you get the turn 1 play, you most likely win this matchup. So plan out your side decks with actual plans on where you are going to use those cards, in what matchup, what battlefield, and how many runes you're gonna have on your turn 1. But you have to balance it out somehow, because you also have to build your side deck according to the meta. You can't just think of your own game plan, you also have to think about the decks you're gonna run into and how they play into your deck. And let's look at my side deck for the current meta and the science behind it. Instantly you can see that 3 of my cards in my side deck are for a specific matchup. Salvage obviously is for gear decks like Aurora, back-to-back is only for Kai'Sa matchup, and the rest of my side deck is not against a specific matchup, because you gotta remember your side deck only has space for 8 cards, and this means rather than building your side deck into 1 or 2 matchups, you want to hit as many decks, as many matchups with your side deck as possible. For example, Falling Star, very good against anything green, it cannot be defied, very good against anything that relies on units, like Master Yi, like Ahri, but then also Falling Star is bad into Aurora, because Aurora units are so big that Falling Star can't kill them, so then I can obviously swap Salvages for my Falling Stars. Call the Weak, good against anything with a small amount of units, like the Aurora, like the normal Yi, like a spell-heavy Ahri, but obviously Call the Weak is very bad into stuff like Darius, Victor, etc., and then I can just swap Call the Weak out for something else. Shen isn't actually in my side deck to counter a specific matchup, it's just to counter a specific card, which is Watcher. Watcher happens to be like the worst counter of Darius, and that's why I actually have 2 Shens in my deck, because in Watcher matchups, I really want to find the Shen. And that's because Shen doesn't get the -3 from Watcher, because Shen is usually played after the Watcher has been played, so Shen counters anything blue. It counters Ahri, Victor, Kai'Sa. Then Vayne is for my own game plan, Vayne is for the Arena's Greatest game, and then if I am going against an aggressive deck with a lot of units, for example Victor, I usually swap out Vayne for Call the Weak even before the Arena's Greatest game, because nothing in my side deck is very good into unit heavy Victor except Shen and Vayne, and Call the Weak and Falling Star are very bad into Victor, so swap in a Vayne, 2 Shens, and then on top of Falling Star being very good into green color, it's also very good in the Arena's Greatest game, because Arena's Greatest ends games quicker, which means that recycling the 2 runes for the Falling Star doesn't matter as much. I would trade the 2 recycles for 2 points, for example, using Falling Star, getting me ahead, and when the game ends quicker, I don't find myself needing as many runes at the end game anyways. So now I have 2 cards in my deck that accelerate my own game plan, 4 cards in my deck that counter at least 2 to 4 decks at once, and then 3 cards in my deck that counter a single specific matchup. And this way I feel like I have gotten the most value out of my side deck as I can. Remember, we only have 8 cards, so with those 8 cards we want to counter as many things at once as possible. We don't want to counter like 1 or 2 things, we want to counter as many things as possible at the same time. Because in a tournament setting, even if Kai'Sa is broken, you're still gonna run into multiple different decks, multiple different legends, and multiple different game plans, so you can't just focus on one thing. And if you have a card in your side deck that you don't find yourself using much, like right now I'm debating if I should swap back to back for something else, because I don't find myself using it much, I don't find myself using it often, then it should be swapped for something else. Or if you don't find yourself having success with it, then swap it out for something else. And finally, when you feel like you're using that side deck card often, you feel like that side deck card wins you games, and you feel like you just find success with that side deck card, then that's the dream scenario. So side decking isn't about having those cards that win you the one specific matchup. Side decking is about having cards that you see yourself swapping in and out, having success with in almost any matchup you play into. Like my side deck, I do change at least one card between every single game. That's really what you want to do with your side deck. You want to actually have cards that you change between almost every single game, and on top of changing them, they actually enhance your chances of winning. So this was like a first part of my upcoming little guide videos. Let me know what you thought, and let me know if you agree with me, because you know, the things I have said in this video are only from my viewpoint, and it's obvious that some people may actually disagree with these points. So please let me know if there was something you disagreed in this video, and also what would you want to see me cover next. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.